case may be evolving into something far more complex than it first appeared, and from a legal standpoint, the stakes are extremely high. If even a portion of the allegations currently being discussed are ultimately proven in court, the situation could expand well beyond a single criminal matter into a broader case involving multiple alleged victims, potential patterns of conduct, and serious criminal liability. However, it is critical to understand that at this stage, much of what is circulating publicly consists of claims, statements, and emerging reports. In a court of law, none of these carry weight unless they are supported by admissible evidence that meets the required legal standards. The distinction between public narrative and legal proof is essential because while public opinion can shift quickly, the justice system operates on a much stricter and more methodical framework. According to the information being discussed, David, who is already in custody, is now facing additional allegations from multiple individuals, some of whom were allegedly minors at the time of their interactions with him. There are also statements attributed to a private investigator suggesting that further evidence may exist, including claims of photographic documentation and ongoing communication with additional individuals. Alongside this, individuals connected to the situation, such as family members, have begun to speak publicly, with David's brother Caleb appearing to distance himself and condemn the alleged conduct, while Celeste Rivas Hernandez's family members have expressed emotional responses reflecting the impact of the situation. At the same time, there are reports of industry consequences, including the termination of professional relationships, removal of content, and distancing by collaborators. While these developments are significant from a reputational standpoint, it is important to emphasize that they do not determine legal guilt. They simply reflect how institutions and individuals may react to serious allegations, particularly in high-profile cases. From a legal perspective, the core issues in this case would likely fall under several categories of criminal law, particularly those involving allegations related to minors. These may include grooming, exploitation, and the possession or distribution of illegal material, depending on what evidence is ultimately presented. In criminal proceedings, the burden of proof lies entirely with the prosecution, which must establish each element of the alleged offense beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the highest evidentiary standard in the legal system and is designed to ensure that convictions are based on clear, convincing, and reliable evidence rather than suspicion or assumption. For example, if allegations involve inappropriate relationships with minors, prosecutors would need to prove not only the age of the individuals involved, but also that the accused knowingly engaged in unlawful conduct, and, in some cases, that there was an element of manipulation, coercion, or exploitation. One of the more significant aspects of the situation, based on current claims, is the possibility of multiple alleged victims. In legal terms, this could allow prosecutors to argue a pattern of behavior, which can be relevant in establishing intent or demonstrating that the conduct was not an isolated incident. However, even in cases involving multiple allegations, each claim must be evaluated on its own merits. Courts require specific evidence for each alleged offense, such as documented communications, corroborating witness testimony, or physical or digital evidence that can be independently verified. The presence of multiple accusers does not automatically establish guilt. Rather, it may strengthen a case if each account is consistent, credible, and supported by additional evidence. There are also claims suggesting that other individuals, such as family members or associates, may have been aware of or involved in facilitating certain interactions. From a legal standpoint, this raises questions about third-party liability, including the possibility of aiding and abetting. To establish such liability, prosecutors would need to prove that the individual in question had knowledge of the unlawful activity and intentionally assisted or contributed to it. This is a high threshold, and mere association or proximity to the accused is not sufficient. For example, if someone unknowingly facilitated a meeting without awareness of any illegal conduct, that would generally not meet the legal criteria for criminal liability. The law requires both knowledge and intent, and without clear evidence of both, such claims would likely not succeed in court. Another key component in cases like this is digital evidence. There are claims that authorities have identified large amounts of material on devices associated with David. If such evidence exists and is introduced in court, it would play a central role in the prosecution's case. However, digital evidence is subject to strict legal requirements. It must be obtained through lawful means, such as a valid search warrant, and must be properly handled to maintain its integrity. Additionally, prosecutors must establish a clear connection between the evidence and the accused, demonstrating that the material was knowingly possessed or controlled by them. Defense attorneys often scrutinize digital evidence closely, challenging how it was collected, whether it may have been altered, or whether it can definitively be attributed to the defendant. In terms of legal strategy, the prosecution's burden is substantial. They must prove not only that unlawful acts occurred, but also that the accused was responsible for them and acted with the required level of intent. This often involves presenting a combination of witness testimony, documentary evidence, expert analysis, and, where applicable, digital records. Each piece of evidence must be credible and admissible, meaning it meets the rules governing what can be presented in court. The defense, on the other hand, is not required to prove innocence. Instead, their role is to challenge the prosecution's case by identifying inconsistencies, questioning the reliability of evidence, and introducing reasonable doubt. This could involve arguing that communications have been misinterpreted, that witnesses are mistaken or unreliable, or that evidence was improperly obtained or lacks sufficient context. The concept of reasonable doubt is central to criminal law. It means that if there is any logical and plausible explanation consistent with innocence, the defendant cannot be convicted. This high standard reflects the seriousness of criminal penalties and the principle that it is better to err on the side of caution than to risk convicting an innocent person. As a result, even cases that appear compelling in the public sphere may face challenges in court if the evidence does not meet this threshold. Beyond criminal proceedings, there is also the possibility of civil litigation. Individuals who believe they have been harmed may choose to file lawsuits seeking damages. In civil cases, the burden of proof is lower than in criminal cases, typically requiring a showing that the claims are more likely than not to be true. This is known as the preponderance of the evidence standard. Civil cases can result in financial compensation for damages such as emotional distress, loss of opportunities, or other harms. They can also proceed independently of criminal cases, meaning that even if criminal charges are not successful, civil claims may still move forward. At the same time, the broader consequences of such allegations often extend beyond the courtroom. Reports indicate that David has faced professional repercussions, including being dropped by a record label and having his work removed or demonetized. Collaborators and industry figures may distance themselves to protect their own reputations. While these actions are not legal judgments, they reflect how private entities respond to risk and public perception. In some cases, contracts may include clauses that allow termination based on conduct that brings disrepute, even in the absence of a criminal conviction. It is also worth noting that public statements made by individuals connected to the case, whether family members, alleged victims, or others, can have legal implications of their own. For example, statements that are presented as factual but cannot be substantiated could potentially raise issues related to defamation. However, in many cases, individuals are protected when expressing opinions or recounting their experiences, particularly if they are participating in legal proceedings or speaking to law enforcement. The boundaries of such protections can be complex and depend on the specific circumstances. As the situation continues to develop, one of the most important factors will be how law enforcement and prosecutors handle the influx of information. When multiple individuals come forward, investigators must assess each claim carefully, corroborate details, and determine whether there is sufficient evidence to proceed with charges. This process can take time, particularly in cases involving digital evidence, multiple jurisdictions, or sensitive subject matter. While it may appear from the outside that developments are happening rapidly, the legal process itself is often deliberate and methodical. Another important consideration is the role of anonymity. Some individuals have reportedly chosen not to come forward publicly, but are willing to speak with authorities. This is not uncommon in cases involving sensitive allegations, particularly those involving minors. The legal system provides mechanisms to protect the identities of individuals in certain circumstances, especially when there is a risk of harm or re-traumatization. However, anonymity can also present challenges in terms of verifying claims and presenting evidence in court. Ultimately, the outcome of this case will depend on the strength and credibility of the evidence presented. While public discussion may focus on the volume of allegations or the emotional impact of the situation, the legal system requires a structured and evidence-based approach. Each claim must be substantiated, each piece of evidence must be tested, and each argument must be evaluated according to established legal principles. At this stage, the case remains ongoing and unresolved. The emergence of additional claims and statements suggests that the situation may continue to evolve, but it is not possible to predict the outcome with certainty. What can be said is that if the allegations are proven, the legal consequences could be severe, potentially involving significant criminal penalties and civil liability. On the other hand, if the evidence does not meet the required standards, some or all of the claims could be dismissed. The key takeaway is that there is a fundamental difference between allegations and proof. While the public may form opinions based on the information available, the legal system operates on a different standard, one that prioritizes evidence, due process, and fairness. As more information emerges, the focus will remain not on what is being said, but on what can be demonstrated in court. Until that process is complete, the case must be understood as an active and contested legal matter where the final determination has yet to be made.